Greetings, this is Artie from Artifact Electronics. In this episode we'll be having a look at this Claricon integrated tuner with an 8-track playback unit in it. So for those of you who think I mispronounced the name, I didn't. It actually is Claricon. See, even Google insists on redirecting me to Clarion whenever I type this in. But I guess they are no longer around. And, well, throughout this episode maybe we'll figure out why they aren't. But here she is in her full beauty. And looking at monitoring the videotape, it looks like we got a perfect match between the genuine wood veneered cabinet and my desktop here. Well, a pretty good match. It is actually, there's no plastic in the cabinet. It is made of wood. Well, if you could call that. A little bit of wood and lots of glue, but it does have a real wooden veneer on it. So of course I could not resist it when I saw this thing for $6. And the main reason is this is the media that it plays. And I'm guessing that there may be some of you out there who don't really know what that is, but it's an 8-track, and all that means is there's magnetic tape in it. It's an endless loop. And the reason it's called an 8-track is basically it has 4 stereo tracks on it and runs about the length of an LP record. So there you have it. And we'll have a look at the mechanism and see how it achieves placing 8 tracks of audio on this with tape and coming out with something that is still recognizable. But here's the unit, and let's see what needs to be done to it. So first, here's the power switch, and the dial lights up, and that's about it. Nothing else lights up. We select the tape, the dial lights go out, and all we have here is a track indicator, which is going to cycle between 1 through 4. Oh, I guess it doesn't cycle when there's no tape in it. Got a bit of background hum in it. So the next one to try is the mono dial, and I have to be really careful here so the man doesn't catch me for playing copyrighted material for too long and takes away the 37 cents I'll get in ad revenue for this video. So sorry that I'll be jumping back and forth and cutting off music all the time, but that's the way it is. So now if we press the AM button and bring up the volume.
Progressive collection actions and fights to get you the best possible tax settlement. They have an A+ rating with the BBB. Call Optima now for your free consultation. Call 800-960-1570.
So AM seems to work. FM. Problem is I don't have a proper FM antenna on it. So I'm going to have to hit the mono button in between because even with the volume at 0 there's still sound bleeding through, and I'm sure somebody will just listen to this and amplify it and go, oh, you were playing copyrighted music for 2.31 minutes and so on and so forth, but I won't talk about that again. So the FM is working, but one thing I see, even it's basically using the power cord right now as the FM antenna, and I can get I can get some good reception. Unfortunately, there either isn't a stereo light on here, there isn't a signal strength meter on here, but when listening to it, you can usually tell whether something you're getting a station in stereo or not. I get speakers up on top, my bench speakers, and they're far enough apart for me to hear if it's in stereo or not. And if you have any doubt, you can always press the mono button and you will immediately know whether what you're listening to is in stereo or not. So other than those controls, we have the button label program, and that's basically the the tape track selector, which lets you cycle from 1 through 4. We have the power button, the AFC button, and a loudness button. And it sounds really crappy the way it is, but with the loudness button out, it sounds even more crappy. So there you have it. Above that, we have the volume control. And while we're at it, let's give it some volume. I got the input set to phono, so we don't have anything else bleeding through, but I don't know if you can hear that, but there is some dirt on the volume control. Here is the bass control. It also has a bunch of dirt on it, but it's already getting less. So once we open it up, we'll have a look and see if we have easy access to spray the controls. The treble control is actually quiet. Balance control crackles a little bit, but I think that's just dirt in the pots and the sliders here. And then of course you got your input selection, phono, tape, FM auto, AM, and then it's got the mono button for I'm not sure if that only applies to FM or to anything that you monitor on this, but that's about the rundown of the controls. Now of course, for the biggest part is, does it play 8-track tapes? Only one way to find out. Let's kill the volume. Select tape, and it lights up the track that it's playing. So that works. That is the release mechanism. You yank it out. So in short, everything seems to be working. Needs a bit of pot cleaning on it. And I mean, there is this big empty space over here, but I have no idea what's behind it. So we're going to have to open up and have a look if there's anything back there that is supposed to be giving us an indication of something or not, or if there just isn't a stereo light. Also keep in mind, this is only a playback unit. You cannot record with this unit, and recording 8-track tapes in a home environment was a huge pain in the ass anyway. There are no fast forward or fast rewind buttons on this thing, and in order to get it to the beginning of one of the tape tracks, you basically have to let it play till it gets to the end of a track marker, which is a piece of metallic tape. And at that point, once it makes a clicking noise and switches tracks automatically, then you know that you're at the physical beginning of a tape track. And then you have to stop everything, set up your recording, and then start recording on whichever track it is at. Well, you can still change tracks, but the main point is that you got to wait for this thing to change tracks when it finds the end of the tape. There is no end of tape because it's an endless loop, but there is a piece of foil tape indicating that that is the virtual end of tape, and at that point it will click and move and change the tracks that it's reading. Now, if it had to use a head with 8-track playback capability, this would get pretty expensive. So on cheaper units like this, what happens is when you're switching programs or tracks with that button, it will actually raise and lower the playback head to correspond with the physical location of the tracks on the 8-track. And hopefully we can see that mechanism in action too when we take it apart. So here we have the back of the unit. It does have an unswitched AC output. Has somebody's name on here too. Dale something or other. And here it tells you that it's model number 33-525, Claricon Products, Division of AMD Electronics in Elizabeth, New Jersey. All of the connections, the external connections here are RCA connectors, even the speaker connectors, which at those times in the late 60s, early 70s, on home stereo equipment, on lower end home stereo equipment, it was pretty common to have RCA connectors for the speakers. But I guess we have a record out, which is just a monitor of what this is playing back, so you can record on reel to reel, I guess, because you can't record anything on here. It's got a phono input, which could actually be quite useful because newer amps generally don't have phono inputs anymore. An AM antenna, an FM antenna, which is basically tied to the power cord right now. This is the way it came. And underneath we have a ground lug, and that's the whole unit. And here's the unit in the flesh. 4 screws and the wooden cover came off. Nothing particularly super interesting in here. Here's the 8-track mechanism. The head is hidden under here, and we'll look at that because one of the things I definitely have to do is clean the head, because that probably never has been cleaned. These are the power transistors for the power amp, the tuner section, power supply section over here. These are the indicator lights for the radio dial, and it's got 4 fuse lamps in there, and all 4 of the fuse lamps are still good. Here are the 4 bulbs used for the track indicators, and here is what I'm guessing is the stereo indicator. So that's been, looks like it's been glued in. And oh yes, safety first. I need to unplug this guy. But we can basically break the glue on this. And here's our bulb. And you can see the bulb in the middle, and the camera won't focus on it close enough, but even a visual inspection shows us that the filament inside is burnt. So what I'm probably going to do is see if I can equip this with an LED. But in order to do that, we need to find out what is being supplied to this lamp here. I don't know if they follow good engineering practice, but both of the wires are the same color, so my guess is that it's probably an AC voltage coming out. But the only way to find out is to cut the wires, put a meter on it, and make sure that we're tuned into a strong FM station, which sounds like it's playing in stereo, and then have a look and see what the meter tells us. Alright, so I tuned in an FM station that sounded good and in stereo, and cut off the bulb and connected alligator clips to it. The problem with the bulb is I was going to look up the bulb type, but that glue they used, this is basically slides into here and then they glued it up with some brown looking glue. It pretty much obscures the type of the bulb. So we'll just have to find out what it is. Now my original guess was AC because the wire colors are the same. And actually we're not. I have to press the button, the FM button, which is, where is it? There it is. So there's the FM button pressed, and the 300 millivolts it's showing in AC hasn't changed. So now let's see if I've actually pressed. No, I've pressed the AM button. So there's your FM button, and it's telling us that it's at 25 volts DC. So now if we turn the dial, okay, so we can see when it detects stereo, it puts about 25 volts onto the bulb. And when you go past it, I guess there's a lot of stations here. So let's find good luck finding an empty band here, but so see it. Alright, so here we have something that obviously is not in stereo. So now we got to do some calculations and figure out how to properly drive an LED. Well, so my guess was wrong that even though these are the same colored wires, it's not AC coming through, it is DC. And just by blind luck we got the proper polarity on it, which I don't know if you can see, but I marked the negative side with a black marker over here. But we got 25 volts DC coming out of this, and I guess the reason they have the same wire color, the incandescent bulb doesn't really care which way you drive it. So whether the positive voltage goes to, the positive voltage can go to either side of the filament in a bulb and it'll still light up. All you got to make sure is that the bulb can take the voltage. But that makes things again a bit easier for us, because if we were getting AC out of this, we'd have to rectify it, and even though a diode itself is obviously, an LED is a diode, but if you use the diode itself to rectify the AC, an LED is considered to be a small signal diode, and the junction wouldn't withstand a high voltage in reverse every half cycle. So you'd have to put a bridge in there and a load and a current limiting resistor and all of that, but since we already have DC, we don't have to do any of that. All we got to do is sit down and figure out what the current limiting resistor needs to be for this diode, put a resistor on it, and hook it up to those two wires. Now the other problem though is that this is really a pressure fit type of thing. The bulb fits in there, and then they dumped a bunch of glue on it to hold it in place, and obviously the glue is dried out since it came out easy. So I did spend some time going through my LED collection, and I found this one that I showed you, and it just so happens to fit into the existing hole with a snug fit. I mean, I'm still going to probably pour some hot glue on top of it, but fits really nicely. So let's go and look up what the current voltage requirements are for the for this diode, and figure out what resistor we need to use. And here are our overly complicated component calculations here. This is really the circuit we're going to end up with. This is the 25 volts and ground coming in on the two yellow wires, and we've marked the ground wire so we know which one it is. We're going to have a limiting resistor and an LED. And essentially some of the givens are that the forward voltage of the diode, a red diode, I don't know this particular one, but generally they're around 1 3/4 volts. We know that the actual supplied voltage is 25 volts, so we know that VL, or V limiting, is 23 1/4 volts, and the diode current is 20 milliamps. Now, how did I come up with that? 20 milliamps is probably a bit on the high side for a red one, but I want it to be bright so the light shines through nicely. And so I just took the diode and I put it in a diode tester, and this is what it looks like at the camera messes it up, but that's what it looks like at 10 milliamps, and this is what it looks like at 20 milliamps. The camera doesn't show the difference, but it is brighter at the 20 milliamps, and because it's lighting something from behind, I aim for the 20 milliamps. So all of this is given, and all we got to do is solve the final equation, and it gives us 11.1,162.5 ohms, and we're going to use a standard value of 1.2K in its place. So here's our setup. Here's a 1.2K resistor connected to the diode, which I stuffed into the hole, and let's see what it looks like. Well, there it is. Let's see if we can find a little better station here where it doesn't flicker. Something good was down here. Come on. Now, one of the problems with this is, as you'll see immediately, it's not lighting up the whole stereo light. God, every single scratch shows up on that front plate. Really, it doesn't look like that. So what it's supposed to say here is FM stereo. You can see the stereo part, but because the original bulb was, you know, it's an incandescent bulb, totally non-diffused, it probably had enough oomph in it to light up the whole cavity in here and make it say FM stereo. The LED is somewhat diffused. It's the only one I have. I tried some other colors too, and those didn't work too well. So what I'm going to do is basically look at it from a distance, and there's your stereo indicator, because yeah, it goes out, comes back on again, and kind of works as a signal strength indicator too, because we just turn the dial until it shows up the brightest, and then we know that our center frequency is good on this. So let me make this permanent, i.e. connect the wires and the resistor permanently to the lamp, and then we'll go on. Here's the end result. The resistor sits right where my tweezers are at, and the other end just got connected directly to the diode. And I overdid it with a lighter to shrink the heat shrink. That's why it's turned black. So should be a little bit more careful. Not that anybody can ever see that, but it's heat shrunk properly. It's not going to touch anything else, and we should be good. So let me stick that back in and get some hot glue around it so it doesn't pop out. And next we'll look at the tape head. Well, we do need a final test of the stereo light. So there you have your light. And here we got some noise in stereo. It actually looks a little better in real life because of weird texture you see on front of the front panel. It's just the way it's catching the light. But the stereo light's working properly, and that light will probably outlast the whole unit. Even though we're running it at a little high current, but it's not really beyond the spec. So there you go, stereo light is fixed. So in order to get to the heads, and heads is not really right because unlike a reel-to-reel, this only has a single head, and that's the playback head that moves up and down to go to the proper track position. It doesn't have an erase head or a record head because it cannot record or erase. So I had to remove this plate, which I did. I wasn't too fond of doing because this is one of those plates where you take the screws out and then when you pull it out you see parts flying all over the place. But fortunately here this does come out, and the only parts that looked like they could be flying around were these two rollers here. But I got it on video, I know where they belong, and you should be able to see the heads there. The head. Let's see how close I can get. Not very. My broadcast quality Sony camera with stereo sound. That's a lie, it's a piece of shit camera with mono sound, but let's get maybe a little more light on there. Anyway, there's the head. I can't show you the head movement because it'll only move if there is an 8-track inserted. But what we'll do, we will get a Q-tip soaked in IPA, and then clean. Yep, there's some dirt coming off, so the sound quality should increase by leaps and bounds. And there's still dirt coming off of it. So let's try the other side of the Q-tip. Quite a bit of dirt on there. Where did that come from? also try to get the pinch roller back here. There's actually bits and pieces of tape on here. We'll have to expand yet another Q-tip. All right, one last pass on the head. Still coming back dirty. Anyway, I'll continue doing this till the Q-tip comes back clean. No need to bother you with this. So here she is in all her glory. It went back together and the 8-track still played, believe it or not. If you have one of these and you really want to get them back in great shape and you don't like my solution with the LED, I'm sure that if you do a web search you can find a correct bulb like this, but make sure you get one that has the wires soldered on already. I wouldn't wish this upon anyone to have to solder these wires onto the end of a bulb. So what you need is a 25-volt bulb. But yeah, the whole thing doesn't light up, but it clearly functions as a not only as a stereo indicator, but also as a signal strength indicator. So I think that's good enough for this. I don't think I'll be using it a whole lot, but it's a true artifact and it belongs into everybody's stereo equipment collection. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and you're all running out to get your own and save these things from the landfill. I mean, there were millions of these built, and I'm sure that millions of these are sitting in landfills and will be sitting there forever. They were very popular in the late 60s, which coincided with the major car manufacturers adopting the 8-track as a music standard for their cars. It is even rumored, as far as I'm concerned, it's a rumor, but that Rolls-Royce and Bentley cars came standard with an 8-track player until the early 80s or late 70s or something like that. But then it fell from grace really quickly with the regular cassette, as we all know and love it. And then, of course, CDs came out, and then, of course, Apple came along, and so on and so forth. Things have changed greatly, but as I said, it's an artifact that belongs into everybody's audio reproduction collection. Thanks for watching again. Please support the channel and with a thumbs up and a subscription if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time. I don't know if you can see this, but I got myself a big-ass splinter. Ooh, and it came out. All is well that ends well. And for postscript number 2, I just realized I totally forgot to address the scratchy pots on the video. And it turns out that you really couldn't get to them from behind. You have to get into the grooves. And the best way to do that is to do it right from the very front. Just take the nozzle for your contact spray and stick it in here and spray it. Now on this one, again, my philosophy is don't fix it if it ain't broke. It turns out that while I was playing around and doing the servicing and stuff, the more I moved the sliders, the quieter they got. So unless I'm going to have bad spots on here and really noisy spots and stuff like that, I'm going to just play some of that great 8-track music, and while I'm doing it, move all the sliders around. And I think that'll probably fix the noise. And again, as I said, if it doesn't, I'll give it slight squirts into the slots, slider slots. But for now, I didn't do it, and that's because I don't think it will be necessary. And I did try the headphones output too, and it works great.